Hi, my name is Kelly Thomas. I am a stage 3 triple negative breast cancer survivor. I am a content creator, founder of TNBC Thrivers on Instagram. I'm also the chat host for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. Besides all that, I am a wife, a cat mama to 2 cats. I love to travel. I love fashion. I love makeup. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So I was the kind of person that, I went to my doctors all the time and, they tell you to do your self breast exams. And I always did it. I think actually I would check my breasts every time I was in the shower and I never felt anything. And one day I just folded my arms and I was like, that wasn't there before. And it's huge. It felt like a golf ball on my left breast. Course, I checked the right one because I'm like, do I have anything like that going over there? And I immediately break down and cry because I'm like, this is breast cancer. I know this is breast cancer. Yeah, so I don't have any family history. No one in my family had breast cancer. They've had cancer, but not breast. I didn't test positive for any gene mutation. I was 33 years old. No one knows why I got this. And that's when the journey began. I immediately called my gynecologist. I had to wait a little bit to get in with her. She's fantastic. She has been like the backbone of like my finding my cancer doctors within all of my treatment. She looked at me and she was like, "You're young, you're 33, it could be nothing, could be something." And so she sent me for a mammogram and ultrasound. That probably took another few weeks to get into there. And then once I had the mammogram, as soon as they began, they knew it wasn't good. Like the first few photos, they were like, the doctor doesn't like what he's looking at. We need to do the photos again. And you ever like be in that kind of situation where you're like really scared and nervous? Like I never had a mammogram before. And I have this, I have the gown on and I'm like trying to keep it together so badly and like trying not to cry because that's the first thing I want to do is cry. And as soon as they said that, I just let it all out because I'm like, I know this isn't good and it's not good. And so we did the imaging again. And then I went across the hall to ultrasound. And I remember they, took images on the screen. And I remember grabbing my phone and taking photos of this. And I was just like, there's something here. There's something not good here. The doctor comes back in. It's like, we want to do a biopsy like immediately. The biopsy was quick. And that was like a day or two. But the biopsy results took a whole week, which is a very long time. And you think like, oh, well, no news is good news, right? But it was like the worst possible news. So ironically, I had a kidney stone at the time, and I fully believed that my body wasn't going to get rid of that kidney stone until I found out I had breast cancer. I was like, I need to go to the doctor. I need to go to the hospital because I need to know where this kidney stone is. And so they took me in and they scanned me, and it was the day I was supposed to get my phone call. And I remember they wheeled me out of the room to get my scan. I come back in, I had a missed phone call from my gynecologist. And she sounds happy. She's like, "Hey, Kelly, it's so-and-so. Give me a call back." And I was like, "All right, awesome." Um, she calls me and she's like, "You have breast cancer and you need to find a breast surgeon immediately." And it was like, who? And so I'm like, "Oh, people get breast cancer all the time and it's, they're totally fine." And she had to knock me down a little bit and was like, "You need a breast surgeon immediately. And time is ticking." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then she says to me, "I hope you don't mind. I already made an appointment for you for the breast surgeon at the hospital here." And I was just like, "Oh my God." Like I was so like honored, like how could I mind? Like it was, first of all, I got the news. I was all by myself in a, a hospital bed. And, it it was such a breath of fresh air because, again, like my mom didn't know what to do. Like no one in our family were like, this is like so foreign to us. We don't know the first thing about breast cancer. I meet with my breast surgeon and this is quite the story itself. I meet with my breast surgeon and she tells me about the oncologist that I would be meeting with, who is the head oncologist at the hospital. Calls him up, finds out he's on vacation. And she's like, we have no time to waste. You're at least stage 3. And I'm like, like I thought I caught this early. Like as soon as I felt it, we did something about it. And it was already stage 3. And she's like, you need to see his partner. And so I go to see his partner and I go with my husband. We do the tumor marker test and that comes back elevated 70. That was like, I got a 75 on that, which meant like, yes, there's breast cancer present in the blood. And I sat down with this gentleman and he goes over, I had something called triple negative breast cancer and that what my treatment plan would be and that I would need chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation guaranteed like right off the bat. And then he turns and looks at me and he's like, Kelly, people die from what you have. And I remember being like, God, I talk about that all the time. And it shakes me so much every single time. 5 years later, that's so hard to say out loud. Okay. And I remember thinking like, people like, no, you're not gonna, I'm 33 years old. My life is just beginning. I just got married at 27 years old. I'm like thriving in my career and like doing big things. Like I can't die. I said to him, you're not going to let me die. And he looked at me and he said, I'll do my best. Long story short, we fired him. I'm not angry at that man because, gosh, what I've been through the last 5 years, I see everything as, there's a saying I love to say, sometimes when things don't work out, they actually do work out. And you can't appreciate the sweet without the sour. And so the day before my first chemotherapy with this oncologist, fired him. I was like, absolutely not. I was very like, the career woman I was very like, in control, even though I was so scared and so nervous and had no idea what I was about to go through. I was like, this is not the doctor for me. And so I fired him before my first chemotherapy and got the doctor I was always supposed to have. So I feel like that was like, he was always supposed to be a part of my story. And he's just absolutely phenomenal. And I fully believe that I would not be here without him. And I also fully believe I wouldn't appreciate him as much as if I didn't go through what I did go through. And I cannot wait for the day that I get to see that oncologist and say, I'm still here. Ironically, we had 2 separate treatment plans. The first oncologist was only going to give me 8 chemotherapies, considering my aggressive stage cancer. And looking back on it now, I don't know if I'd be sitting here if I stayed with that doctor. So with his plan, I was only supposed to get like 4 ACs and 4 Taxols, and that was it. And then do surgery and then do radiation. I finally meet my new oncologist, Dr. Cohen, and he comes in. And of course, he just busts through the door and he's like, I heard you're starting trouble in here. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is awesome. And he's like, I reviewed your plan. It's good, but mine's better. The initial plan, you may get a home run, but I'm going to knock it out of the park. And so his plan was to do the 4 AC, 8 Taxols, and 4 carboplatins, which back in 2018, there wasn't a lot of patients doing carboplatin that weren't BRCA. But considering it was already stage 3C, and he said that carboplatin it's a metallic chemotherapy, and it can be very hard on the body, but you're 33 and I think you can take it. And if you were my sister, I'll never forget that. He said, if you were my sister, this is exactly how I would treat you. So I did that first chemo oncologist list, which a lot of people don't know. That oncologist came to my first appointment and confronted me on firing him, which speaks to his own professional character. But yeah, I'll never forget it. I went in with my husband, and first day of chemo is such a long day. You have your nurse that comes in and they explain everything that's going on with you, and that they're like, oh, you have to use separate bathrooms and flush twice and all the stuff that you need to know. And it just tries to cram in all the information that you need to know about chemotherapy. And she leaves the room to get the chemo. And as soon as she leaves the room, he walks in and he's like, so I hear that you're going to whoever. And yeah. And I was like, well, what? You weren't returning my phone. I was like, are you? And I looked at him, I said, are you seriously confronting a cancer patient on the day of their first chemotherapy? And he leaves. And the nurse walks in. They almost come in like two ships. And she looks like she saw a ghost. She goes, I've been a nurse for 25 years. He was standing outside of the room listening to us the whole time. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. So that's the backstory of my first chemotherapy. So I had my first chemotherapy, technically oncologist list. And then it was the following week, I met with Dr. Cohen in his office. And yeah, we went on from there.
I'm doing it. Living my best life.
Well, back in my day, we did the AC first. Nowadays, they save it for the end. But I did AC first. My first round went very well. I felt like I didn't have any symptoms, any side effects. I was like, I am Superwoman. I can do this thing. As for the second and third, that was a totally different story. I was very nauseous, extremely nauseous, so nauseous. I don't want to do this anymore. And I tried everything. I tried cannabis. Not that I wanted to, because I don't like the feeling of being high. I just didn't want to be nauseous. But when you are so desperate for something, you'll try anything. Ginger candies, even the pre-meds that they give you to kind of help with the nausea, they weren't doing anything. And I remember saying to my oncologist, it's bad. It's bad. And I don't even know if I can continue going on. And he was like, nope, you're going to hang with me. We're going to get through this. And we're going to figure this out together. And so I actually helped him come up with a way to help me. So I was on, what was it? Decadron, Zofran, and Ativan. And I had this idea, and I'm like, what if I took them all at the same time? And he's like, they won't counteract, so nothing bad will happen. And so we put our heads together, and that was the secret sauce. I started to do that. I was on a lot of steroids. If you look at old photos of me, I do not look the way I look today. And yeah, I gained a lot of weight. I also went on a health journey, but yeah, I gained 13 pounds during chemotherapy because of the steroids. My breast surgeon actually specialized in nipple sparing mastectomy. I didn't, it wasn't that I sought after a surgeon that did that because, again, we're fighting cancer, like nipples or no nipples, like whatever. Most breast cancer patients do lose their nipple because sometimes the tumor is very close to it. Mine was like kind of in my armpit area. Like mine was right here and it was up and away. And so if the doctors can save them, they will. And I highly recommend, if you can save yours, to do it because it helps a lot with the, recognizing your body after surgery and making yourself, like, identifying yourself and having the self-love for yourself again. Um, so I was so anxious about having surgery for breast cancer. My first surgery ever, I never had a stitch, never needed anything. So, like, going through treatment, I remember that was the part that stressed me out the most. And I literally waited like 2 weeks before my surgery to tell my breast surgeon what surgery I wanted to do. Even though, like, when I first met with them, they were like, double mastectomy, hands down, double mastectomy. And, you are, you are the CEO of your body, right? And so it's still your decision on what you want to do. There might be a high recommendation for a certain type of surgery, because I was so nervous. And there's one thing I say to people is that I was starting to make a decision on fear of, what is surgery going to feel like? How am I going to feel? Versus choosing a surgery that would benefit me fighting cancer. And so I remember I went back and forth with, like, oh, well, can we do a lumpectomy? Like, lumpectomy seems like much smaller of a surgery and like minimally lesser invasive than a double mastectomy. And I knew the decision I had to do, and it's like sometimes you got to make decisions and do it scared. And I remember just going into her office like 2 weeks before my surgery, and I'm like, let's do this nipple sparing, skin sparing double mastectomy, sign off on that. My surgery took a long time because I had my plastic surgeon in there as well. So that was like 7 hours. And so with the surgery, then he put expanders on. I had under the muscle surgery. And so I would say definitely get opinions. There's a lot about breast reconstruction and surgeries that I didn't necessarily know. But a lot of times when you're in that space, like, the information is kind of like going in one ear and out the other. So I highly recommend any kind of appointment that you have with like a surgeon or plastic surgeon, oncology. You always have somebody there with you. I had no idea there was under the muscle surgery. There was over the muscle surgery. You keep your nipples, you say, you lose them. And luckily everything worked out in the best possible way for myself. Recovery was the worst thing ever, but if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have changed a damn thing. So I healed from the double mastectomy, and then I went on to the plastic surgeon. And so I met with him weekly, and we would do, they call them fills. And so basically they fill saline in, I think I was doing 60 cc's a week, which is actually pretty low. I know a lot of, you can do more, but yeah, they can be uncomfortable. And so I know some people do like 100. I think they even offer me like, do you want to do 100? I'm like, let's just take our time and just do this. And yes, meanwhile, my oncologist is like, are you at radiation? What's going on? And I'm like, I'm getting my fills. Like, like, la-di-da, we cut the cancer out, right? Like, I'm fine now. It's like, no, we're not fine now. And actually, ironically, my plastic surgeon and my radiation oncologist fought at my first radiation appointment because My plastic surgeon was like, no, I get her next. And he's like, no, she's a cancer patient. I get her next. And I had to get my oncologist, my medical oncologist on the phone. And he's like, Kelly, you're going radiation. So what we did, we got all the fills in, got fully expanded, and then did radiation. I did 28 rounds of radiation, which is about like a month and a half. Radiation was interesting. I would say, some people are like, oh, this is the easy part, right? Because, with chemotherapy, you're very, nauseous and, you have to shave your head and you don't feel well and all that comes along with that. And then surgery is like physical, you're being opened up and radiation, like it's just like it's a bad sunburn. They explain it to you. If I could explain radiation, I would say it's more mental than it is physical, although it is physical because when you get burned by as you go on and your skin gets red and you start to burn a little bit, it does feel like a sunburn. But there was times that I remember like laying on that table and crying. And I can't tell you why. It was just like, I was just sad. Or I'd be like in the changing room and putting my regular clothes on. And I would just like sit there for like 5 minutes and just cry. And I can't even tell you why, but it was just such an emotional part of the treatment. And like eventually it would subside. And then radiation is tricky, right? Because someone like me, I wanted breast implants. And so breast implant surgery, especially having it what they call delayed breast reconstruction, it could change. It all depends on how well you go through radiation. And so I made it my absolute mission to research what I needed to do for my skin to ensure that I could have the surgery that I wanted to. And read a lot about different creams. My radiation department highly recommended Aquaphor. And, I learned about Aquaphor is greasy and it could stain your shirt. So, get a loose fitting shirt that at Target or whatever that you don't care about. And I would Aquaphor myself 3 times a day. After treatment, once I got home and once before bed. And then when I finished treatment, I continued going. And like occasionally I would have appointments with my plastic surgeon to see like how's the skin looking. And I did very well. My skin did get red, but it never peeled or broke open. And that's like the real testament right there. So I did 6 months, 16 neoadjuvant chemotherapies. Once that was done, I went for a breast MRI where they look at the breast tissue and the lymph nodes, and they see, if you're a complete response or not. And I'll never forget it. I went for the scan. I meet with my oncologist. He puts his arm up, give me a high five, and he's like, we did it. It's a complete response. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so amazing. I'm crying. And we're like, because going back to my breast surgeon, which I feel like I need to mention here, my breast surgeon, she's very serious. She looks at the paper and she's like, we'll see what surgery says. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you should be happy. Like, it's a complete response. That's what we wanted. That's the overall goal here. And she was right. She's never been wrong. And I honestly wish that she would look into my eyes and tell me how the rest of my life is going to plan out, because whatever this woman has said to me, she has been completely on the money. I have the surgery and there is no tumor left. However, there's cancer in my lymph nodes. 2 of 8 of my lymph nodes came back positive. But here's the kicker. It wasn't triple negative. It was low grade estrogen positive. And I'm like, well, how does that work? Because I was 0 on everything. And come to find out that I had a mutation. I had a cancer mutation. So basically, what a cancer mutation is cancer is really smart. And so when you're getting chemotherapy, it's dying. It doesn't want to die, it wants to thrive. And so it could change its DNA so it could survive, because when you're triple negative, you get triple negative drugs. And so my body started to grow estrogen and was able to survive and was already in my lymph nodes at that point. This only happens to 3% of people. I always hit those low targets for some reason, and I'll never forget it. And I felt completely defeated. So I say to him, I said, well, how does this happen? Like, this only happens to 3% of people. So it's the good part was when this happens, when estrogen grows, estrogen is very slow growing versus triple negative, which is very aggressive growing. So by the time they found it, it was still considered low grade estrogen cancer. So out of the whole cancer cell, there was only 20% of it was estrogen cancer. The rest of it wasn't cancer at all. And because of that, I remember he was like, follow a lot of doctors. And there's this one doctor that I really admire. And he says, no matter what cancer my patients have, I will treat every single cancer. And so he goes, technically, you're 99% TNBC, 1% estrogen. And so I'm going to treat that 1% estrogen, and was put on tamoxifen. But I only made it 3 days. I only made it 3. I was starting tamoxifen, and then I started Xeloda. Xeloda is an oral chemotherapy. I did that for 8 cycles, which is 6 months. But tamoxifen made me want to unalive myself. I was crazy depressed and emotional and had very strange thoughts in my mind. And again, that was probably a 1% of patients that experienced that. But yeah, after 3 days, we were on the same page that I was able to stop taking it. So I get home, I text him, and I was like, I'm getting these like very weird thoughts and visions in my head. And he says, this is not worth the quality of life. He's like, I'm not stressing over this, over 1% of cancer that you may or may not have. And so, yeah, that's the story about me being a little bit of estrogen positive and only surviving 3 days on tamoxifen. It was just one of those things where it was like, it was so low grade. And then my oncologist was also like, what if they messed up at the lab? What if it was never estrogen? I still think you're 100% TNBC. So, we just kind of banked on, it wasn't worth even talking about ever again. So, like, I remember when I was diagnosed in 2018, there was no TNBC thrivers back then. There was nothing on social media that you saw uplifting stories. You had to find them. Like, you had to aggressively search triple negative breast cancer and find people. And I remember I would call my mom in a panic, and I'd be like, Mom, I saw this person and now they're not here. Then I found this other person, they're not here. She's like, a few things. You don't know them. You don't know their treatment. And their story is not your story. And I've clung on to that so much because I think it's so easy to be on the internet and being like, oh, well, that person has the same type of cancer that I do, and their cancer came back. So that must be my cancer is going to come back. Or if I'm talking to someone, I remember being in year 3 and someone was like, oh, my cancer came back in year 3. And immediately you get the thought, you're like, oh, wow, like this could be the year for me. And it's like, that is so not the case. And an oncologist that I'm very connected to said one thing to me. It's like, we know on Google, statistics are off. They're just off. But also what you have to remember is there are so many more medications nowadays that the statistics do not reflect those numbers. There's one message that I like to say a lot, and it's not something that I came up with. It's actually something my mother came up with. It's their story's not your story.
This course is run and I'm on my way.
Their story is not your story.